Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today I'm doing my updated 2026 US Senate map prediction for the month of September, the beginning of September now. So without further ado, let's get into it. On the 2026 Senate map, there are going to be 35 Senate races up in the 2026 midterm elections. The standard 33 seats plus 2 additional special elections taking place, one in the state of Ohio and one in the state of Florida. Ohio is to fill the term of what was J.D. Vance's Senate seat, now Senator John Husted's seat in Florida, which was Marco Rubio's seat and is now Senator Ashley Moody's seat. So Democrats start off with 34 Senate seats, Republicans start out with 31, and then the 35 left for grabs. Now we do know a good number of these seats, how they are going to go, so we're going to start off by assigning these seats to the Democrats and Republicans. This first round are all going to be states I expect to be 15% margin of victory or more in their respective Senate race. Now, for Oregon, we can look here in the Wikipedia page. It says this is Democratic Senator Jeff Merkley. He is running for a fourth term. He would be announcing this run based on the election results in Oregon back in 2020, where he won by 17.6%, and the state being a very solid Democratic state, Oregon will be safe for the Democrats without too much of a doubt on that one. With the state of Idaho neighboring Oregon as well, this is a very safe Republican state, as it was in the 2024 presidential election and as it was in the past Senate races as well. Idaho will be a safe Republican win, as will the state of Wyoming as well. The state of Montana did have a very close competitive Senate election last time in 2024, where the Democrat John Tester lost to Republican Tim Sheehy by only 7.1%, and then back in 2020, Steve Daines won by 10% against former Governor Steve Bullock. Unless a candidate of that caliber jumps into the race, Republicans should have no problem holding on to Montana by more than 15% of the vote. Now, similarly for the state of Colorado in 2020, John Hickenlooper won by 9.3%. In 2022, we saw a Senate race where Michael Bennet, the Democrat, won by 14.6%. Given that this should be a stronger night for the Democrats, Democratic midterm year, it'll be right around that 15% margin, but I do think the Democrats and John Hickenlooper narrowly break that 15% margin. It should also be worth noting that in 2020, Hickenlooper defeated Republican incumbent Cory Gardner to win this seat, so only losing by 9.3% likely means Hickenlooper will expand on that margin from what it was in 2020. Now we're going to go to the state of South Dakota. South Dakota, a safe Republican win back in 2020 with Mike Rounds, and fully expect it will be so once again. South Dakota starts as safe. We're going to skip by Nebraska right now because I do want to talk about that race a little bit more in depth. Kansas, at this current point in time, we're probably going to see a safe Republican win unless something happens to make it more competitive. Oklahoma is going to be in a very similar category. Texas, New Mexico, and Alaska I also all want to come back to, so those I don't think are going to be safe at this current point in time. Louisiana could be interesting. It's Republican Bill Cassidy maybe getting a serious primary challenge from a more MAGA candidate from the Republican Party, but whether or not this race stays red or not, I think it will continue to remain red by more than 15 points. The only thing that may change that is if the former Democratic governor, John Bel Edwards, were to jump in that race, though as of now I do not believe he is in the race, so that would likely be safe for the Republicans. Arkansas with Tom Cotton will be safe. Mississippi with Cindy Hyde-Smith. Both of her elections thus far have fallen under that 15% number. Was only a 10% win back in 2020, and that was her first term. So it's possible we could see this race be more or be under 15. I think for now it starts out as 15 points, but that's certainly an important one to watch for as well. In the state of Alabama, Tommy Tuberville is retiring, so it is an open race on the Republican side, but Alabama is one of the most red states in the country. Fully expect it will be a safe Republican win. The state of Tennessee, where Republican, I believe this is Bill Hagerty's seat, he should win here, safe, really no problem. Kentucky, this is Mitch McConnell's Senate seat. He is not running for re-election. He is retiring, so it is an open race with a competitive Republican primary underway there with Daniel Cameron, Nate Morris, and I do believe Alan Wilson running as well. So this could be a very competitive race, but for now, this is going to be safe for the Republicans in the state of Kentucky. West Virginia will also be safe for the GOP, one of the most Republican states in all of the United States. The state of Illinois, this is Dick Durbin's Illinois Senate seat. He is not running for re-election, but again, Illinois, one of the most Democratic states in the country, and a midterm wave year. Fully expect this will be more than 15% margin of victory for the Democrats in Illinois. The state of Virginia is very interesting because Virginia its Senate race in 2020, Mark Warner won by 12.1% against the Republican Daniel Gade. The only thing that I think can make this race competitive would be if former governor then, or come that time, Glenn Youngkin decides to run. He's the current governor of Virginia, but he will be term limited in November. So if he decides to run for this race, it could get more competitive. Otherwise, I don't think Warner has much of a trouble and wins by more than 15%. The state of Delaware also would be a safe Democratic win. New Jersey, though it is becoming more of a competitive race, especially at the presidential level and its upcoming governor's race in November. At the Senate level, Cory Booker's up for re-election. He holds very strong approval ratings. I don't think there's a scenario where Booker wins by less than 15 points. This puts Democrats up to 40, Republicans at 44. A handful of Senate seats left in New England, starting with Rhode Island as a safe Democratic win for Jack Reed. Massachusetts with Ed Markey, a safe Democratic win, and New Hampshire and Maine I want to talk about more in depth. So just starting out the initial round of things, I'm very confident Democrats will win 42 Senate seats by more than 15% of the vote. And Republicans, I'm very confident will win more than 44 Senate seats by 15% of the vote. Then we have a handful of Senate seats that could be over 15, that could also be a little bit under 15, and one of these is the state of South Carolina with Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Now, Lindsey Graham won in 2020 by only 10.3% against Democrat Jamie Harrison, and Lindsey Graham's approval ratings have really not gotten any better since 2020, which leaves open the possibility of a general election potentially being under 15%. Now, that being said, he already has the endorsement multiple times now by President Trump, so if Lindsey Graham survives the Republican primary, we're probably going to see him win the Senate race in right around 15%. But I think the possibility of it going under 15 certainly is on the table in South Carolina. In the state of Florida, with Republican Senator Ashley Moody, Florida has become much more of a Republican state. In recent years, Marco Rubio won his Senate race by 16.4% in 2022. Rick Scott in 2024 just won his race by 12.8%. The Democrats have yet to put up a very serious challenger to Republican Ashley Moody in the Senate race. It may be under 15%, albeit narrowly, but I think the Republicans hold on here without really too much of a problem. This puts the Republicans up at 46. Democrats are at 42. Now we move into the races that are considered to be likely. These are races in between a 15 and a 5% margin of victory, so anywhere in that range of results. And there are a lot more of them on this list that are more likely Republican than likely Democrat, but we do still have some pretty important ones. New Mexico would start out in the likely Democratic category. It voted for the Democrat Ben Ray Lujan by 6.1% in 2020, and it voted in 2024 for the Democrat Martin Heinrich by about 10 points. So this one could certainly get up to that 15% number, but it's more likely than not it's going to be in that likely category. At the presidential level, Kamala Harris just defeated Donald Trump in the state by about 6 points. Back in 2020, Joe Biden won it by about 11. So this is a state that seems to be more in the Democratic side, but it doesn't seem to be by an overwhelming number, that I think it still remains in the likely Democratic category. The next state that I have as likely Democratic is the state of Minnesota. This is Democratic incumbent Tina Smith. She is retiring, so this is an open Senate race in the state of Minnesota. She won back in 2020 by 5.2%. There was a lot of third-party vote happening in this race, so that could be something interesting to watch for as well. But she won by a likely Democratic margin. The presidential race, we saw Kamala Harris win the state by 4.2%, which is lean for the Democrats, but albeit very narrowly, in an election that should be more favorable for the Democrats than 2024 was. Whoever the Democrats end up nominating, whether it's Angie Craig or Peggy Flanagan, I think Minnesota ends up being a likely Democratic win. It also is worth noting the Republicans at this current point in time do not have a very strong candidate they are putting up in this race. The only notable Republican that's currently running was the Republican that ran against Amy Klobuchar in 2024, Royce White, who lost by 15.7%. So it may be a closer race than it was in 2024, but the Republicans still do not have a great chance at winning the state of Minnesota in 2026. Next, we're going to start with the state of Alaska, Alaska being likely Republican. A big reason Alaska is likely Republican and not safe all has to do with the prospect of former Democrat Congresswoman Mary Peltola expressing interest in potentially running in this race. If Peltola were to enter, she put up a very formidable campaign to win a U.S. House seat in Alaska in 2022, defeating the Republican Sarah Palin by 9.9%. And then in 2024, she narrowly lost her re-election to the House by only about 2 points against the Republican Nick Begich. This is on the same ticket where President Trump was winning the state of Alaska by about 13 points. Peltola is certainly one of the best candidates out there for the Democrats in 2026, and if she were to run, this rating certainly could go down to lean Republican, maybe even tilt Republican come Election Day. But for now, with her not currently in the race, I think Dan Sullivan starts out in the likely category of 5 to 15, but this is certainly a race that could get more competitive if she were to jump in. The next state that I would put in the likely Republican category would be the state of Nebraska. This is Republican Senator Pete Ricketts facing off against independent Dan Osborne. Osborne put up a very formidable challenge on the Senate level in 2024 against Republican Senator Deb Fischer, winning by 6.7% against Osborne. Now, Pete Ricketts, on all things being considered, is considered to be more of a stronger Republican candidate than Deb Fischer was, and likely won't take Osborne for granted as much the Fischer campaign did. While at the same time, this election environment should be more favorable for someone like Osborne to win than 2024 was. So I think that all kind of evens out, and it remains around a 5 to 10 point margin of victory for Pete Ricketts in this Senate race. Definitely very important to watch for at this current point in time. The next state that I'm watching very closely is the state of Texas. Texas is Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn. Cornyn won re-election in 2020 by about 9.6%. And then we saw another Senate race in 2024. Ted Cruz won by 8.5%. Now, the prospects that could change this race are if the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, ends up defeating John Cornyn in the Republican primary. The early polling has showed Ken Paxton has a much harder time in the general election at winning against the Democrats than John Cornyn does. Colin Allred, the nominee from 2024, is running again, with other notable Democrats like James Tallarico considering a run as well. The ratings for this race go, if John Cornyn's the Republican nominee, I have it as likely Republican. If Ken Paxton's the Republican nominee, I have it nearly falling into the lean Republican category of 5 to 1%. But for now, John Cornyn, as a Republican incumbent, starts out as likely Republican for this race. Republicans are at 49, Democrats are at 44. Now, the last seat I have in the likely category is the state of Iowa. Iowa, we just got the news just yesterday, as the time I'm recording this video, that the Republican incumbent Joni Ernst is officially not running for a third term. So it's a wide open race on the Republican and Democratic sides for this race. Now, Ernst looked like she could potentially be in some trouble after her comments she made about Medicare and the "we're all going to die" quote that she made, which caught a lot of criticism for her. Now, Iowa overall has been more of a solid Republican state. It voted by about 12.2% in 2022 for the Republican Chuck Grassley. In 2020, Joni Ernst won by 6.5%. So more of a competitive race for the Ernst race. We also saw President Trump just carry the state by 13.2%. With Joni Ernst now out of the race, I honestly think there's a better chance of Republicans holding this race now that Ernst is not running, but I still think it's going to be mildly competitive, putting it in the 5 to 15% likely category at this current point in time. Democrats are certainly hoping to contest the state, as they are trying to contest the governor's race as well, but I think the Senate race ends up being the more Republican of the two when everything is said and done. This puts Republicans at 50 Senate seats. Democrats are at 44 with 6 seats remaining. Now, the good news for the Democrats is a lot of these seats that are left do have a strong chance at going for the Democrats, but Republicans also have a good chance in a few of these seats as well. But these are the main 6 Senate seats that I'm watching for 2026 that I expect will all be 5% margin of victory or less, and I think they could all be very, very close. And I'll start first with the state of Ohio. Ohio, this is going to be Republican incumbent John Husted, who was appointed by Governor DeWine to fill the remainder of J.D. Vance's term, facing off against one of the Democrats' best recruits they could possibly have gotten. Former Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is running for the Senate again in 2026. Now, back in 2024, we saw the Senate race where Republican Bernie Moreno defeated the Democratic incumbent by 3.6%, so a lean Republican win, on the same ticket when President Trump won the state of Ohio by 11.2%. Sherrod Brown is one of the strongest Democratic recruits, if not the strongest recruit, in this cycle for this race. Now, the problem for the Democrats is they're going up against in a state that has gotten a lot more Republican, but Sherrod Brown also does better than the typical Democrat in the state of Ohio. Now, John Husted is a stronger Republican candidate than Bernie Moreno is, but the election year is also a stronger night for the Democrats than 2024 was, which ultimately means this has the makings of a very competitive election in a formerly very competitive toss-up state. For now, I have the race starting out in the lean Republican category in between 1 and 5% for John Husted, but this is certainly a very close race to watch that if everything breaks for the Democrats in 2026, like a big wave election could happen, we may see Ohio get into that under 1% GOP category where Sherrod Brown may be within striking distance of flipping the seat. A lot would have to go wrong for the Republicans and go right for the Democrats, but that is certainly something that could be happening. The last seat that I start out firmly in the lean category would be the state of New Hampshire, where Democratic incumbent Jeanne Shaheen is not running again in the Granite State, so this is going to be an open race. Both Republicans and Democrats have landed pretty strong candidates, though. U.S. Congressman Chris Pappas from the 1st District is going to be the Democratic nominee, and on the Republican side, former U.S. Senator Scott Brown is going to be the Republican nominee, both of which are very formidable candidates in their own rights, and this is going to be a very competitive race to watch for in the state of New Hampshire that I honestly think is kind of being a little bit kept under the radar. Back in 2022, Maggie Hassan won by 9.1%. 2020, Jeanne Shaheen did win by 15.6%, but Scott Brown's also the strongest Republican candidate that's run for the Senate race for a very long time, since Kelly Ayotte back in 2016. So I do think the Republicans are in for a tough fight, but a fight they could potentially win in New Hampshire. Now, New Hampshire voted at the presidential race in 2024 for Kamala Harris by 2.8% over Donald Trump, and I do expect the election environment to be more Democratic friendly in 2026. But I think a 4.5-point victory right now for the Democrats, Chris Pappas, would be just enough to keep it under 5% in the lean Democratic category. But I do think the Democrats have a narrow advantage starting out in the Granite State. And with that, we have 4 remaining Senate seats in Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, and Georgia. These are going to be the main targets, no pun intended, that everyone's watching for in 2026. Starting with the state of Maine. Maine's a very interesting one because this is Republican Susan Collins, the Republican who often breaks with her own party and with President Trump, and that has served her very well in the state of Maine, helping her get reelected several times now in a state that has been overwhelmingly Democrat at the Senate and governor level and at the presidential level for many years now. The best thing Susan Collins has going for her at this current point in time is the Democrats have yet to have a super well-known notable candidate enter this race. However, that has changed a little bit when Democrat Graham Plattner has entered the race, and he has caught a lot of media attention, so that could certainly be changing things as well. But another rumor is whether Governor Janet Mills decides to enter this race or not. Point being, Democrats are starting to pick up momentum in the state of Maine, even though Susan Collins won her Senate race back in 2020 by 8.6%. It is looking like it's going to be a very competitive race. Now, Trump also lost the state of Maine to Kamala Harris by 7 points, which means it's going to be very competitive in this race. Whether it's Janet Mills or Graham Plattner, it's going to be very close. I think right now Susan Collins starts out slightly favored to win in the lean Republican category in between that 1 and 5% margin, but I would not be shocked come November of 2026 if this is the election year that Susan Collins does ultimately lose a very close race. I will bet, though, if Susan Collins does win or lose, that ranked choice voting will be utilized in this race, as I'm expecting it to be very, very close, much closer than it ended up being in 2020. Now we have the 3 remaining battleground states, starting with the state of Michigan. Michigan, this is an open Senate race. This is Democratic incumbent Senator Gary Peters. He is not running for a 3rd consecutive term. The Democratic primary is completely wide open between State Senator Mallory McMorrow, former Wayne County Health Director Abdul El-Sayed, and Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who are all in a very tough fight for the Democratic primary. On the Republican side, the Republican nominee from Senate in 2024, Mike Rogers, is running again, and so far he has the Republican nomination pretty much on lock. Michigan's been one of the closest states in the country in recent elections. Michigan voted for Donald Trump by 1.4% at the presidential level. At the Senate level, even closer, Elisa Slotkin voted for Mike Rogers by 0.34% in this race. This one I think is going to be very, very close. We could see a scenario with such a divided Democratic primary that Mike Rogers may be able to narrowly eke out a victory, but without Donald Trump at the top of the ticket to boost voter turnout, and a midterm election year is supposed to be more favorable for the Democrats, I do think the Democrats start out as a narrow favorite to win this race. I do have it going under 1 point yet again, but Mike Rogers certainly has a chance at winning this race. But I think the Democrats start out as narrow favorites at this current point in time in the state of Michigan. That puts Democrats up to 46 seats. Now we go to the state of North Carolina, where North Carolina Democrats are feeling very optimistic after 2-term Republican incumbent Senator Thom Tillis announced he would not be seeking re-election, and the Democrats are officially putting up former Governor Roy Cooper. He is running in this race. He will be the Democratic nominee, and he'll be facing off against Republican National Committee Chairman Michael Whatley for this race. Whatley is expected to be the Republican nominee. And this is going to be one of the closest marquee races to watch in the country in 2026. 2022, we saw the Senate race. Ted Budd, the Republican, won by 3.2%. Tom Tillis only won in 2020 by 1.7%, and third-party vote played a very big role there. While they're going up against the Democrat, Roy Cooper, who in 2020 won re-election by 4.5% as a Democrat in the state of North Carolina on the same ballot when Trump won the state by about 1.5%. And back in 2016, we saw Cooper defeat the Republican Pat McCrory by 0.22% in a very, very close race. This is really, really going to be an interesting state to watch, as this is basically an immovable object meeting an unstoppable force. You have North Carolina, which I consider to be more of a lean Republican state, facing off against the perhaps only Democrat in the state that could actually win a Senate race. And it looks like it's going to be a very tough fight. The Democrat could do it. The Republican could do it. Right now, in my own rankings, I have Roy Cooper once again getting a little bit lucky and winning the state of North Carolina by under half a percentage point, narrowly defeating Michael Whatley and becoming the first Democrat to win a Senate seat in North Carolina since, I believe, 2008. So it's certainly been a very long time, but I do think Roy Cooper narrowly beats Michael Whatley at this current point in time, in large part due to the popularity that Cooper had as he was governor of North Carolina. This is certainly going to be a very close race. Governors don't have the best track record at becoming senator of the state that they run for, but in a swing state like North Carolina, it's certainly very possible. Lastly, we have the state of Georgia. Georgia, this is going to be Democratic incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff. He is running for a second term for re-election, and the best thing Ossoff has going for him is the Republicans right now currently do not have one single candidate they are united behind. U.S. Representative Buddy Carter is running in this race. Congressman Mike Collins is also running in this race. And former University of Tennessee football coach Derek Dooley is also running. Whereas former governor of the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who is the candidate that many Republicans wanted to run, ultimately decided he would not be running for this race, and Republicans were essentially left scrambling. Georgia is a very interesting state because in 2024, at the presidential level, it did vote for Donald Trump by about 2.2%, a lean Republican win. But at the Senate level, both in 2022, Raphael Warnock defeated Herschel Walker by 2.8% in a runoff, and in 2020, both Ossoff and Warnock won in the runoff elections in these respective races. So they have been very close but narrow Democratic wins at the Senate level. And for 2026 right now, since the Republicans are still left scrambling to unite behind one candidate and what's expected to be a pretty messy Republican primary, I think Jon Ossoff is narrowly favored to hold on and win the Senate race at this current point in time. Right now, by a little bit more than 1%, about 1.5% victory at this point in time, Jon Ossoff wins this race, giving the Republicans a majority in the U.S. Senate 52 to 48, but the Democrats do make some gains by flipping the state of North Carolina. That's how I currently have the map going right now at the beginning of September of 2025. This will be a very interesting video to come back to in a few months to see if things change, especially in states like Michigan, North Carolina, Georgia, Maine, or New Hampshire, and maybe even Ohio. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today we're looking at my updated governor map for the 2026 midterm elections. There's 36 governor's races that will be up in 2026. We have a lot to go through, so let's get started. Starting with the state of Oregon. Oregon, this is going to be held by Democratic Governor Tina Kotek. She won back in 2022 and is eligible to run for a second term. She has not yet officially stated if she will run or not, but it's fully expected that she will be running. On the Republican side, one Republican that's running is Danielle Bethel, a Marion County commissioner, and researcher Kyle Dusick is also running as well. Potentially, former UFC fighter Chael Sonnen has expressed interest in running for the race as well. Oregon did have a pretty competitive governor's race back in 2022 with a lot of vote splitting, a third-party candidate getting 8.6% of the vote. So it was a very competitive election back in 2022. At the presidential race, though, we saw Kamala Harris win by 14.3% in 2024. Now, given 2026 is supposed to be a stronger midterm year for the Democrats, I do think Oregon ultimately goes into the safe Democratic category over 15% of the vote. But that's a very interesting one to watch for without a doubt. Now we have the state of California. This is Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. He is term limited and cannot seek a third consecutive term. California's primary, the way they do it, is completely wide open, and the top two candidates, both Democrats and Republicans, will advance to the general election that gets the most votes. A long range of candidates are running. It's really too early to say for sure who's going to end up being the candidates. Right now, Democrat former Congresswoman Katie Porter has been leading in a lot of the early polls. On the Republican side, Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton have been leading in second or third place usually, but it's still way too early to say for sure who'll be the candidates. But California, fully expect will be a safe Democratic seat after we saw it go safe blue for Kamala Harris in 2024 and the governor's race back in 2022. Newsom won it by 18.4%. Fully expect it'll go that way in 2026. For the state of Idaho, this is going to be a Republican governor, Brad Little. Idaho does not have a term limit in its constitution, so he can run for a third term. He's not yet stated if he will do so, but Idaho is one of the safest red states in all of the United States, so I fully expect, whether it's Little or not, Idaho will remain safe for the Republicans. Wyoming, I would also put in this similar category. This is going to be Republican Governor Mark Gordon, and the state law limits the governor to 2 consecutive terms, but Gordon is not ruled out challenging the law constitutionally and seeking a third term, but regardless, this will likely be a Republican win no matter what happens in the state of Wyoming. Now we're going to skip Nevada and Arizona because those states are going to be very competitive, and I do want to talk about them a little bit more. The state of Hawaii, we fully expect will be a safe Democratic win. The state of South Dakota, I think we can fully expect this will be a safe Republican win as well. Again, not really too much of a competitiveness going on here. Governor Larry Roden is going to be running, or could be running, for another full term of doing so, but he has expressed interest. Other Republicans have jumped into this race as well. Looking now at the state of Colorado, Colorado is interesting because this is going to be an open race as the governor, Jared Polis, is facing term limits, but Democratic U.S. Senator Michael Bennet is running in its primary. If he were to win the primary and go on to the general election, he really should not have too much of a problem at winning this race. The governor's race in 2022, Jared Polis won it by over 19 points. I think it's possible we see Bennet win Colorado by more than 15% of the vote as well. The state of Nebraska, the governor level, I don't think it's going to be very competitive in 2026. This is Governor Jim Pillen. Dan Osborne, the only candidate, the independent that could have made this race competitive, is officially running for U.S. Senate. So without anyone really formidable to run for this race, I think we see Nebraska be a safe Republican win. Kansas we're going to come back to because that is currently held by a Democrat. Oklahoma, fully expect this will be a safe Republican win. Oklahoma, this is going to be Governor Kevin Stitt, who is term limited, and it is going to be a complete wide open Republican primary at this current point in time. Texas, we're also going to come back to because I think this has the potential to be a little bit more competitive as well. Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas, fully expect she'll win re-election by a safe Republican margin. Iowa is going to be a very competitive, wide open race. Illinois, J.B. Pritzker is not yet stated, I believe, if he'll be running for a third term for governor of Illinois or not. We did see an election back in 2022 where Pritzker won by 12.5%. In a more blue wave year, though, I think Pritzker would narrowly break that 15% margin and win re-election by a safe number. Tennessee, on the governor's race, U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn is rumored to be running for governor in the state of Tennessee, and if she were to win that race by a general election, based on how Tennessee votes, fully expect to be more than 15% of the vote. Similarly, in Alabama, U.S. Senator Tommy Tuberville is running for governor of this state, also a very red state. Fully expect it'll go safe for the Republicans. In the state of South Carolina is very interesting. There is a complete wide open Republican primary underway. Now that Governor Henry McMaster is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Several Republicans are running, including the Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette, the Attorney General Alan Wilson, and also U.S. Representative Nancy Mace. This is going to be a very big fight in the Republican primary, but ultimately I think it will still end up being pretty solid for the Republicans in the general election. As for the state of Florida, Florida is very interesting because we did see Ron DeSantis win by 19.4% in 2022. Now Florida will be an open race in 2026 as Ron DeSantis is term limited. Right now, Byron Donalds, the U.S. representative, is the likely candidate to become the Republican nominee, a very close ally of President Trump. Though there is speculation that First Lady Casey DeSantis may launch a bid to try and succeed her husband as governor of the state of Florida. Regardless, I think we're going to see Florida be a safe Republican win at the governor level in 2026 as that state continues to trend to the Republican direction. Now, as we move to the Northeast, we have Maryland with Governor Wes Moore. The only way this race can be competitive is if former Governor Larry Hogan decides to run against Moore, as of now, he's not currently in the race. Moore should win this race by a safe margin, as he did back in 2022, winning it by 32.4%. Shouldn't be too much of a trouble for Wes Moore in that one. Pennsylvania, we're going to skip just very momentarily and jump up into the Northeast. Connecticut's going to be an interesting state. It was won by the Democrat Ned Lamont by 12.9%. In 2022, Connecticut's races are always more competitive at the governor level than they are at the presidential or Senate level, but I think this one does go in the Democratic category for right now. Rhode Island's interesting because its Democratic governor is not holding very high approval ratings, but Rhode Island overall is still a very Democratic state, so I do expect it will be safe Democratic pretty much no matter what. Massachusetts, Maura Healey, the Democratic governor, won back in 2022, running for a second term. Fully expect she'll win by more than 15% in Massachusetts as well. The state of Vermont is very interesting, as Vermont currently has Republican Governor Phil Scott. He's very popular in the state of Vermont. If he runs, he will win re-election by more than 15% of the vote. If he does not run, this pretty much becomes a guaranteed Democratic flip by more than 15 points. I don't believe he has officially stated what he will be doing yet for 2026, so he could run again, he could not run again. We'll have to wait and see how it all goes, but for now, Vermont stays in the safe Republican category. So that's every state on the governor's map that I have being more than 15% of the vote at this current point in time for the Democrats and the Republicans. Now we have the states that I consider to be in the likely category. These are states that are in between 5 and 15%, that can go anywhere from they're probably not going to be competitive, but they do narrowly fall under 15%, all the way down to, no, these states get really competitive around that 5-point number. And since we went from west to east, we're going to start in the Northeast and go from east-west this time, starting with the state of Maine. Maine, this is Democratic Governor Janet Mills. She won back in 2022 by 13.2%. Now, she is term limited and cannot seek a third consecutive term. So the race is wide open on the Democratic and Republican sides. There has been some candidates entering this race, including the Secretary of State, Shanna Bellows, former State Senate President Troy Jackson's running, and son and businessman of U.S. Senator Angus King. Angus King III is also running in this race, as well as several other Democrats as well. On the Republican side, there are a handful of Republicans currently running. The most notable, well-known so far, is member of the Bush family, Jonathan Bush, I believe the cousin of the former president. So this could be a very interesting situation in Maine, where the Bush family does have a very notable presence in the state. This race could potentially get more competitive than initially thought. But with a likely Democratic win in 2022 and likely Democratic win in 2018, even though the Bushes have a lot of money to invest in this race, I think we still see Maine start out in the likely Democratic category at this point in time. That race could get more competitive. I don't believe Maine has ever consecutively elected the same party governor 3 terms in a row, so that could be something to watch for in 2026 as a sleeper race. But again, I do think the Democrats are favored to win Maine in the likely Democratic category. In the state of New Hampshire, this is going to be the Republican Governor Kelly Ayotte. She just got elected in 2024. New Hampshire, like Vermont, has 2-year terms for its governor. The only Democrat currently mentioned as potentially running is former State Senator Tom Sherman, who was the nominee for governor in 2022. We just saw Ayotte win the governor's race in 2024 by about 9 points against Democrat Mayor of Manchester, Joyce Craig. So I think we're going to see Kelly Ayotte probably win again by a likely margin. I don't think it'll be over 15 points, but I think it'll be probably right around that margin. Now we have the state of New York. New York, this is going to be Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul, who she is facing a Democratic primary challenge from her own lieutenant governor, and her approval ratings, definitely the earlier part of the year, looked like she was in real jeopardy of potentially losing a Democratic primary. But now she looks like she'll probably survive that and go off into the general election, where she may be facing off against top Trump ally, Representative Elise Stefanik of New York's 21st District. Now, the last governor's race in New York was actually surprisingly very close. Hochul won by 6.4% against the Republican Lee Zeldin. There's a real opportunity here for the Republicans in New York, in such a blue state, to try and make it a very competitive race, especially as President Trump in 2024 did better than most past Republicans in the state of New York. But for now, I think Kathy Hochul will survive and win re-election in between 5 and 15%. But I don't think New York is the safe Democratic slam dunk win that it has been for the past 20 years or so. I think we may see this race get a little bit more competitive. But I do think Hochul at this current point in time will survive and win. Now for the state of Pennsylvania, this is going to be Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro, who Shapiro in his own right certainly has 2028 presidential ambitions as well. But first he has to get through this governor's race where he'll be facing off against likely Republican nominee Pennsylvania State Treasurer Stacey Garrity, who in her own right is a pretty strong candidate, certainly much stronger than the 2022 nominee Doug Mastriano. But Josh Shapiro is also a very strong governor and formidable governor for this race after he defeated Mastriano by 14.8% in 2022. Even though Pennsylvania voted for Donald Trump by 1.7% in 2024, I certainly expect Josh Shapiro will win by a pretty heavy margin, though it does fall under 15%. I currently have it going likely Democratic for Josh Shapiro without him really facing too much of an issue. Though Stacey Garrity being the Republican nominee instead of Doug Mastriano may help the Republicans a little bit down ballot in some of the House races, I don't think she has much of a chance at winning this governor's race against Josh Shapiro. That puts the Democrats at 12, Republicans also at 12. The state of Ohio, this is going to be a very interesting race, as this is Vivek Ramaswamy, the Republican candidate for president in 2024 and top ally of President Trump, facing off against either Ohio Department of Health Director Amy Acton and maybe potentially against former U.S. Senate nominee Tim Ryan. He's expressed interest in running for this race. Amy Acton is officially in the race. The early polling has shown Vivek leading by around 5 to 6%, depending on the poll that you're looking at. Ohio voted for Mike DeWine by 25 points in 2022, but only voted for DeWine over Cordray, the Democrat, by 3.7% in 2018. At the presidential level, it voted for Donald Trump by 11.2%. I think Vivek Ramaswamy is probably in that same mold of J.D. Vance type candidate in the state of Ohio, where he should win by more than 5 points, but I don't think it's going to be much more than that number, like Vance's Senate seat in 2022. I think Vivek starts out in the likely Republican category for the state of Ohio. Now, that's another likely win for the GOP. The next likely state we have to talk about is the state of Minnesota with Democratic Governor Tim Walz, he is eligible to run for a third consecutive term, as Minnesota does not have term limits. He has not yet stated if he will do so, but there has been some reports that we should be getting that decision in the coming weeks or so. Now, if he does not decide to run, there is, I'm sure, a large number of Democrats that would want to run for this race. On the Republican side, there is the nominee from 2022, Scott Jensen. He is officially running again for this race, as well as other Republicans potentially wanting to run this race as well. Now, in 2024, Kamala Harris won the state against Donald Trump by 4.2% at the presidential level. Tim Walz won it in 2022 by 7.7%. I think it's possible we see a little bit more of a competitive race, as governors going for a third term usually have less success than they do when going for a second term. That's usually just like anti-candidate and anti-party fatigue. But I do still think if it's Tim Walz or another Democrat, we see Minnesota go in the likely Democratic category over 5% margin of victory, especially in the midterm wave year of 2026, which should be a good night for the Democrats. That puts Republicans up to 13, Republicans also at 13. Now we're going to go to the state of Texas. Texas I have going in the likely Republican category for Governor Greg Abbott. Now the only thing that could potentially be interesting in this race, we know Greg Abbott is going to be running again. This will be his, he is seeking a fourth term in this race and announced his intentions to do so. The Democrats could be putting up strong candidates, though, whether it's James Tallarico, Joaquin Castro, or Beto O'Rourke, which are definitely stronger than typical Democratic candidates for the state of Texas. And if Ken Paxton becomes the Republican nominee for Senate, that could potentially hurt some Republicans down ballot, where maybe Greg Abbott gets hurt a little bit in the margins on that race. But I do think Greg Abbott is certainly, more likely than not, going to hold on and win this race by a likely margin, especially as he won back in 2022 against Beto O'Rourke by around 11 points. So he really shouldn't have too much trouble at winning that race, but that could be something interesting to watch for. Now we have the state of New Mexico. New Mexico, this is going to be the Democratic Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who is term limited and cannot seek a third term. Several Democrats are running, including Deb Haaland and Sam Bregman and Ken Miyagishima as well. On the Republican side, Rio Rancho Mayor Greg Hull is running, as well as Justice Judith Nakamura and several other Republicans as well. New Mexico's governor's race back in 2022 was a 6.4% win for Grisham over the Republican Mark Ronchetti. So despite routinely voting for Democrats, New Mexico does seem to have pretty competitive elections at around a 6-point race for Kamala Harris in 2024. In a more Democratic year like 2026 is supposed to be, I think it certainly stays over 5 points in the likely Democratic category in the state of New Mexico. The last, for sure, likely state I have to go over is the state of Alaska. Now, this one's very interesting because Alaska, there were some rumors that perhaps Democrat Mary Peltola would decide to run for this race, though Democrat Tom Begich, a former state senator and leader in the Democratic state Senate, has announced a campaign. And he said that he would enter the race because he expects Peltola to run for the U.S. Senate race. Now, this race, I think, will be competitive, as Alaska's governor's races are usually more competitive than it was in 2022, where the Republican governor Dunleavy won by 22 points. Back in 2018, Dunleavy won by 7 against another Begich. This was against Mark Begich in this race. And then before that, in 2014, it was held by the independent Bill Walker. So Alaska's governor's races can get a little bit interesting. It will be an open race on the Republican side as well, as the governor is term limited, and the Republicans that are currently running are Edna Devarez, state senator. We have Shelley Hughes, as well as the Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom, and State Senator Clark Bishop as well. For now, I have Alaska starting out in the likely Republican category, but that's an interesting one, certainly to watch for in coming days and months and such for this campaign. Now with that, we have the remaining 7 governor's races in the United States that I expect to be the most competitive of all the states that are up in 2026. And I'm going to first start with the state of Kansas. Now, Kansas is interesting because it's currently held by Democratic Governor Laura Kelly, though she is term limited by Kansas's constitution and cannot seek a 3rd consecutive term. Now, on the Democratic side, State Senator Ethan Corson and Cindy Hochler are running for the Democratic nomination, with Corson getting the support of the Governor Kelly. So, it seems that the Democrats, at the very least, have their hand-picked candidate, according to the governor, to support in this race. Though without the governor in the race, it's going to be very tough for the Democrats to hold the seat. The Republicans right now have a completely wide-open primary, with the former Governor Jeff Collier running State Senate President Ty Masterson, Vicki Schmidt, the Kansas Insurance Commissioner, and Secretary of State Scott Schwab running all in this race, as well as other potential Republicans that could jump in. Now, these last 2 governor's races in Kansas have been very close. Kelly won by 2.2% in 2022, and 2018 she won by 5 points against Chris Kobach with a lot of third-party vote. So it's going to be very interesting to watch in Kansas how this all ends up going. I am going to very narrowly put it as likely Republican, like just a hair over 5%. I considered putting it in lean Republican, but I think it will still be kind of competitive. But the Republicans should be flipping the state of Kansas in the 2026 governor elections. Now we move on to the state of Iowa. Iowa is going to be very fascinating, as this is Republican Governor Kim Reynolds, who is not going to run for a 3rd term, though she could if she wanted to. She's decided not to. The Republican primary right now, representative from the 4th District, Randy Feenstra, seems to be the likeliest candidate to become the GOP nominee for governor, with several other potential names and Republican names mentioned in this race. On the Democratic side, the Democrats are going to be nominating State Auditor Rob Sand, who is the only statewide Democratic office holder in the state of Iowa. Democrats are very ecstatic about having Sand be the candidate, and it's going to give the Democrats a rare opportunity at contesting the state of Iowa, which in 2022, Kim Reynolds won by 18.5%. 2018, it went for Kim Reynolds by only 2.7%. So we have seen at the governor level at least a competitive election the last time there was a Democratic midterm year. Iowa's going to be fascinating to watch because Rob Sand is a strong Democratic candidate, but Iowa's also a pretty reliably red state now, so it's going to be very interesting to see how this all goes. For now, I think Iowa starts out in the lean Republican category, just a bit under 5%, because I do think Rob Sand is going to put up a very formidable fight in usually a very red state. Iowa goes red. Now let's look at the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, Democratic Governor Tony Evers is officially not running for a 3rd consecutive term. Democratic Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez has announced her campaign, with several other Democrats, David Crowley, Josh Call, Cavalier Johnson, Calder Royce, and former party chairman Ben Wickler as seen as possible candidates. On the Republican side, Executive Josh Schoeman has announced his campaign. State Senator Patrick Teston, Tom Tiffany have both expressed running, as well as other candidates like Eric Hovde and Rebecca Kleefisch as possible Republican candidates as well. Wisconsin's been one of the closest states in the country in recent years at pretty much every single level. The governor's race, Evers won by 3.4% in 2022. In 2018, he defeated Scott Walker, the Republican governor, by 1.1%. At the presidential level, it voted for Donald Trump by 0.86%. In 2024, for Joe Biden by 0.63% in 2020. And at the Senate level, it just had a Senate race under 1 point at 0.85% for Tammy Baldwin versus Eric Hovde in 2024. And in 2022, Ron Johnson won by just 1% in 2022. So what a absolutely close state Wisconsin is. I fully expect this will be a very close state again in 2026. For now, I'm going to have the Democrats just narrowly favored to hold on and win the state of Wisconsin in this open race. The Democrats seem to be having a better job and turnout in the state of Wisconsin, and I have whoever the Democrat ends up being winning by about 1.5 to 1.2% in the state at this current point in time. Definitely very close to watch for in the state of Wisconsin. Michigan, a very similar situation. Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, though she won by 10.5% back in 2022, she is now term limited and cannot seek a third term. This race right now is Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson, all running on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, it looks like U.S. Representative John James is most likely to be the Republican nominee, but there is something interesting happening in this race. Detroit Mayor Derek Duggan, a former Democrat, is running this race as an independent. In the early polling, he's been taking up a very considerable amount of vote, anywhere from 10 to 25%, depending on the poll. And that is making this race very close. We are essentially having Duggan splitting such a large percent of the vote that the Democrat and the Republicans are getting in the mid to high 30s and only leading by about 1 or 2% or so. Given Michigan's history at the governor level from 2018 to 2022 of Gretchen Whitmer winning by likely Democratic margins, I think we could see a decently sized Democratic win, but I think this race is going to be a lot closer. I do think the Democrats nearly hold on in the lean Democratic category. But with Mike Duggan being in this race, this is certainly a very interesting situation that's changing the dynamics of Michigan in this race. And again, despite the fact that at the presidential level, Michigan just went for Donald Trump by 1.4%. Next, we have the state of Georgia. Georgia, this is Governor Brian Kemp. He is term limited. It will be an open race. We have an interesting Republican primary underway where the Attorney General Chris Carr is running and Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is also running. Burt Jones has the endorsement of President Donald Trump, which is certainly a big bonus in the Republican primary. Of the Democratic sides, it's currently a wide open race between State Senator Jason Estevez, former Mayor of Atlanta Keisha Lance Bottoms, State Representative Derek Jackson, and possibly former State House Minority Leader and nominee for governor in 2018 and 2022, Stacey Abrams, has expressed interest in running. We saw Brian Kemp win against Abrams in 2022 by 7.5%. Back in 2018, Kemp defeated Abrams by 1.4%. Now in an open race in Georgia, I expect the margin of victory to be a lot smaller in this race, especially as we saw in 2024, President Trump win the state by 2.2%. I think Georgia is going to be very close, in large part due to the population growth in the Atlanta area, but I do think the Republicans are going to narrowly hold on and win this race by around 1.5% in the state of Georgia in a very, very close race. Now we move out west to the last two remaining governor's races, starting with the state of Nevada, which voted in 2022 for the Republican Joe Lombardo, defeating Democratic Governor Steve Sisolak. He is eligible to run for his second term and will be doing so. He'll be facing off against businesswoman Irina Hansen, a Republican, is challenging Lombardo in the GOP primary. State Attorney General Aaron Ford is running for this race. Steve Sisolak, the former governor, rumored to be running as well. Ford's the only Democrat in the race right now. Nevada is interesting as it only voted for Trump by 3.1% in 2024 after voting for Joe Biden by 2.4% in 2020. At the governor's level, Lombardo did defeat Sisolak by 1.5% in a very close race. I'm once again expecting this to be a very close race. I do think Nevada right now, based on the way the state is trending, narrowly holds on in the lean Republican category by a little bit more than 1 point at this current point in time. Now we have the state of Arizona, where Democrat Katie Hobbs, who won very narrowly in 2022, is facing off against two Republicans, Karen Taylor Robson and U.S. Representative Andy Biggs, both of which have the endorsement of President Donald Trump in this race. This is expected to be one of the closest races, if not the closest governor's race in the United States, after Hobbs only won in 2022 against Kari Lake by 0.67%, but ultimately ended up being roughly 17,000 votes separating Hobbs and Lake. So I am expecting this to be a very close state, especially after we saw such ground made up by President Trump in 2024, where he won by 5.5%. I initially have had this race going in the lean Republican category in past predictions, but I did flip it last month to be in the tilt Democratic column, and I am keeping Arizona in the tilt Democratic column for now, as the early polling has shown. Katie Hobbs has a very slight lead over the Republicans at this current point in time. And this is a situation where I think the election environment being a little bit more Democratic friendly narrowly helps Hobbs keep this race in the Democratic side. So with that, I have the Republicans winning 19 governor's races, Democrats winning about 17, with some very close races in Nevada, Arizona, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and potentially in Kansas. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today, for the month of September, we are looking at the updated 2026 U.S. House elections predictions. Now, obviously, what's going on with the House is very much up in the air right now due to the congressional redistricting possibly happening in several states. As of the time I'm recording this video, Texas just signed its new House map into law, which is going to net the Republicans possibly around 5 new House seats for them. And there's also a lot of other states that could be redistricting as well. So all that's still very much up in the air, but this is where things currently look like at this current point in time. On 270 to win, the current consensus ranking for 2026 has the Republicans favored in 212 House seats, Democrats 202, with about 21 still up for grabs. Now, just to show you where things currently stand on the polling side of things, the generic vote for 2026 on the Real Clear Politics polling average has the Democrats favored or up by about 3.1%. Now, at 3.1%, just to give you an idea, in 2024, the Republicans won 50.6% to 47.8%. So that's roughly about 2.8%. So going from 2.8 for the GOP up to about 3.1 for the Democrats, that would be a swing of roughly about 5.9% on the congressional map if that were to play out that way. So we can actually see what this would look like. We can swing it by about 5.8% on the congressional map just to see what it would look like just based on the 2024 results. Now, obviously, this is not going to play out exactly this way, but if it did play out this way, Democrats would get up to about 231 House seats, Republicans 204. And that is a big reason why Republicans in a lot of states are trying to redraw their House maps, is they know based on the polling data today, the Democrats would probably take back the House and by a pretty large margin. That's why they're trying to redistrict to stop that from happening. So that's where things would be right now. So let's go state by state on the look at the maps right now, look at what they currently are, and what, if there's any rumors about redistricting, looks like. For the state of Alabama, right now, the way things are currently constructed, I don't believe there is much to be talked about in the state of Alabama. I don't think much is going to be changing in that state. Now we can also go to the state of Alaska. Alaska, obviously just one district. This is Nick Begich. Unless Mary Peltola runs for this race again, we're probably going to see it remain in the Republican category. Arizona is interesting. Even Arizona, I don't believe there's been any rumors about redistricting, but regardless, there are 2 very important districts to watch for. In the 1st district with David Schweikert and the 6th district with Juan Cisco-Manny. These districts are very, very, very close and very important to watch for 2026. We saw Dave Schweikert win Arizona 1 by 3.8% after a vote for Cisco-Manny in Arizona 6 by 2.5%, both very, very close. In 2022, Arizona 1 only went for Dave Schweikert by 0.88%, and 6 only went for Cisco-Manny by 1.5%. Both of these districts are certainly very close and important to watch. We saw Arizona 1 on the Cook Political Reports Cook PVI is only a Republican +1 district in Arizona 1, where Arizona 6 is an even district without a Republican or Democratic lean based on this most recent Cook PVI. So these districts are very, very close and super important to watch for 2026. If the Democrats are winning the congressional vote by 3.8%, like the polling suggests, we could certainly see both of these districts going to the Democrats in 2026. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but for the sake of argument, let's just go through that. Arkansas is probably going to remain the way it currently is. California is really fascinating right now because California has a voter referendum out there for November of 2025, and that is to essentially allow the state legislature to have a special legislation to redraw the congressional map, essentially in response to what Texas was doing, where it drew out about 5 Democrats becoming 5 Republican seats. California is now wanting to do that to get rid of 5 Republican seats. The way that I've seen the map being redrawn, firstly, it would cement Democratic wins with Adam Gray in California 13 and cement a Democratic win in California 45 for Derek Tran as well. Let me just zoom in here to get the map 1 here. Okay, so those seats would be definitely Democratic wins. Now, what the new map would be doing would be targeting a lot of very close Republican seats, one being David Valadao in California 22, one being down here with Young Kim in California 40, another being Ken Calvert in California 41, one being Kevin Kiley in California 3, as well as Republican Darrell Issa in California 48. That's what the rumor map would look like. If it went into account, it would essentially flip all 3 or all 5 of those Republican seats to the Democratic side. And based on the early polling of the referendum, it looks like that referendum is going to pass in November by a pretty large margin. So again, for the sake of this video, for the sake of argument, let's say that happens in California, the map goes through, Democrats net about 5 seats in California. This puts the Democrats up to 211 House seats, Republicans currently at 207. The state of Colorado could be redistricted, but I haven't really heard much suggesting that it will be. Colorado 8th District barely voted for Gabe Evans in 2024 in a very close race. We saw it go for Evans by about 0.73% in 2024. So a very close district, one certainly that could flip in 2026. It voted even, or it's even on the Cook PVI, so certainly a very important toss-up one. If that 3.8% margin is correct, Colorado 8 will probably be going blue in 2026. But again, a very close race that we have to watch for. Connecticut right now, unless something major happens in Connecticut 5, it'll probably remain all Democratic. Delaware, same thing, statewide, probably going to remain Democratic without too much of a doubt. Florida is interesting because there have been some reports Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, wants to redraw his congressional map to also try and get about 5 Republican seats out of Florida. Now, the rumored seats that he'd be targeting, for one, is this district, Jared Moskowitz's district, near the Palm Beach area where President Trump lives. That district has certainly been a target. Another is Florida 9 with Darren Soto, right outside the Orlando area. That has been a target district as well. The next one, given Hillsborough County has gotten a lot more red in 2024, Republicans are hoping to draw out the Democrat Kathy Castor, the Democrat representing the Tampa area as well. That would be 3 Democratic flips for sure that DeSantis is targeting. From there, it could be any one of these Democrats in the surrounding 22, 20, 25, and 24 area. DeSantis wants to get down, I believe he said, 5 seats. So if he can do that, maybe he also target Florida 22 or maybe Florida 20 or any Florida 25 maybe. Let's just, for the sake of argument, pick 2 extra seats to target out. Let's say Florida 20 and let's say Florida 25 with Wasserman Schultz. If DeSantis can do this and flip the seats, this will net 5 seats for the Republicans in Florida. That would take away the gains the Democrats got in California due to them doing it in Texas. That's what DeSantis says he wants to do in the state. Will that ultimately happen? That's a big if. We'll have to wait and see, but that's what the rumor is right now. In Georgia, everything's pretty much locked in. I don't think there'll be a redrawing in the state. Georgia, nothing really has been confirmed on that one. For the state of Hawaii, they'll both remain in the Democratic side. Idaho will remain both for the Republicans. Illinois, their map is already pretty gerrymandered and pretty redrawn, so I don't think there'll be any redrawing in Illinois. These seats are all pretty much guaranteed to be going the way they currently are. Indiana, President Trump has been meeting with several Republicans in the state of Indiana trying to redraw their map. It looks like that one's going to happen. Specifically, President Trump is targeting Indiana 1 with Frank Mervan. Trump wants this redrawn to get an extra House seat out of Indiana 1. It's possible they could try and redraw Indiana 7, but I really don't think that one's going to happen after it voted for the Democrat by about 39.4%. It's going to be very tough to get rid of that one, but Indiana 1, which only voted by 8.5%, could be redrawn in 2026 to help the Republicans. So that's the latest on Indiana. Iowa's not going to get redrawn, I don't believe, but there's a lot of competitive races up for grabs in the state of Iowa in 2026. Most notably, Marinette Miller Meeks in the 1st District, who we just saw in 2024 barely hold on and win by 0.19%. This is absolutely a race the Democrats are targeting for 2026. But Iowa also has another very close race in Iowa 3 with Republican Zach Nunn, who won by 3.8%. The rumor was that President Trump spoke to Zach Nunn. Nunn was considering a run for governor of Iowa, but President Trump convinced him to run for re-election as he believed this race was very close and needed every advantage the Republicans had to try and hold on to this race. It should also be worth noting that Iowa 2, which was a safe Republican win in 2024, Ashley Hinson may be running for Senate for Joni Ernst's Senate race that could be opening up that seat as well to being more competitive than it usually otherwise would be. I think we see for sure Iowa 1 go to the Democrats in 2026. It's possible we see Iowa 3 also go for the Democrats. That one I'm a little bit less sure of at this current point in time. It is Republican +2 at the Cook BVI level, so certainly in range for a Democratic flip. it did vote by 3.8% for Zach Nunn in 2024. Only voted for Nunn by 0.69%, though, in 2022. So very close to watch in Iowa 3. I am going to leave it narrowly in the Republican category, but I could certainly see it flipping to the Democrats as well in 2026. In Kansas, there is some rumors that Kansas, the Republicans want to redraw their map as well to get rid of the 3rd district in Kansas 3. Now, if that were to happen, that would be a very big boost for the Republicans. The governor candidate, the former governor running for governor in Kansas, wants to redraw the map to try and get out the 3rd district and bring it to the Republican side. That may very well end up happening, but that rumor is still pretty fresh. So for now, I'll leave it in the Democratic category, but that could be happening as well. Kentucky, the only competitive race here is going to be Andy Barr's 6th district, which is still expected to be in the likely Republican category for now, so that's going to remain pretty much how it is. Louisiana, I also don't think there's really too much going on here in terms of redistricting. That should remain as is. Maine's going to be very close, as the early polling has shown Jared Golden and Paul LePage, the former governor, in a very tight race. This is one where I actually think the Republicans are going to be very narrowly be able to flip, because Paul LePage, though he did not do very well in the governor's race in 22 against Janet Mills in that governor's race, he did win, as I saw a commenter mention, he did win Maine's 2nd district in his 2 or his 3 governor elections that he did run. So Golden so LePage does very well in that 2nd district, and I think Golden may just not be able to get enough votes to narrowly lose this race in the 2nd district. So I actually think Maine's 2nd does flip from Jared Golden to Paul LePage in 2026. Now, as for Maryland, the rumor has been that Governor Westmore wants to redraw the congressional map in Maryland to net the Democrats an extra Democratic seat. There's only one Republican seat in Maryland 1 with Andrew Harris, but the rumor is that Moore wants to redraw the map and get the seat to the Democratic side. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to have that happen, redraw the map, and give the Democrats an extra seat. In Massachusetts, I don't think anything's going to be changing there. Very Democratic state, probably not going to be any redistricting there. Michigan has some very close races to watch for on this House map. Michigan 7 with Tom Barrett and Michigan 10 with John James, both of which are going to be very close and very important to watch for in 2026. We did see these states have very close elections in 2024. Barrett won by 3.7%. James won by 6.1%. James is going to be an open race now that he's running for governor. Back in 2022, Tom Barrett actually lost to Elisa Slotkin in this district by 5.4%. John James won by 0.49% in that district. On the Cook PVI level, we did see these 2 districts here, that Michigan 7 is an even district, while Michigan 10 is Republican +3. Based on the current predictions right now, I do think the Republicans barely hold on to Michigan 10, where the Democrats do narrowly flip back Michigan 7 with Tom Barrett. So that's there. Minnesota, again, I think we pretty much see everything hold on. Angie Craig's not running for the 2nd district. She is now running for governor, or for Senate, but I do think, but I do think we see the race hold on there. Mississippi remains the way it is. Missouri is interesting because Missouri is working on redrawing their map, and the target is to get rid of the Democratic district in Missouri 5, held by Democrat Emmanuel Cleaver. That is the district they are targeting. Looks like that one's going to happen as well. That one flips to the GOP, gets the Republicans up to 215 on the current map so far. Montana, both I expect will remain in the Republican category. Nebraska, unless the Nebraska map gets redrawn, which there has been some inklings of this by the current Congressman Don Bacon, but assuming that doesn't happen, the Democrats are certainly favored to win the 2nd district, and I think they are going to when everything is said and done. After we saw the 2nd district vote for Don Bacon by 1.9% in 2024, but at the presidential level, Kamala Harris won it against Donald Trump by 4.7%. So certainly seems to be the 2nd district is going to be heading towards the Democrat way in 2026. For Nevada, the only district that's really competitive is the 3rd district. I think the Democrats are going to hold on there. New Hampshire, the 1st district, now that Chris Pappas is running for Senate, will probably be the most competitive it's been since about 2016, but I still think the Democrats do have a slight advantage to hold on, especially in this election environment. New Jersey, the only district to watch for in New Jersey really is New Jersey 7 with Tom Keene. New Jersey 9 with Nellie Poo could be potentially competitive, but based on the election results here, we saw it be a 5-point win for Poo, the Democrat, in 2024. Keene did win by 5.4%, though he did win by 2.8% in 2022. Maybe the Democrats put up a tougher fight and a better candidate in this district, but I think Tom Keene ultimately does hold on and win in New Jersey 7, even by a very close margin in 2026. I think that does end up happening. New Mexico, Gabriel Vasquez, the Democrat, we did see, I believe he won in this race by 0.7% against Yvette Harrell, so a very, very close race in 2022. In 2024, Vasquez won against Harrell by 4.2%. I think we probably see this race hold on in the Democratic hands for 2026. The state of New York could be interesting if Kathy Hochul is able to redraw its congressional map. New York, as much as some other states, has not had the same amount of attention and talk about redrawing its map as some others, but if it does, that could certainly change things up, taking away maybe New York 17 from Mike Lawler, perhaps trying to take away New York 1 from Nicholas Lalauda is possible as well, and then maybe one of these upper districts like at least Stefanik's New York 21 maybe could be targeted. But for now, I think we see Laura Gillen hold on in New York 4, and the rest of the map remain pretty much the same. Maybe Mike Lawler falls in New York 17, but I think he's favored to hold on right now. North Carolina, only North Carolina 1 is currently up for grabs, and I think Don Davis, the Democrat, holds on and wins that one. North Dakota, I think also remains pretty much how it is right now. Ohio, there's a lot going on in the state of Ohio with the Republicans trying to redraw the map. The rumor is they redraw the map. The Republicans want to be able to flip Ohio 9, Ohio 13, and Ohio 1. Ohio and Texas sort of started this whole conversation on redistricting, and it looks like Republicans are maybe getting their wish, getting Ohio 13, Ohio 9, and Ohio 1 on their side. I don't think the Republicans have any chance of getting Ohio 3 or Ohio 11, but they could heavily redistrict and heavily gerrymander to get those 3 seats in Ohio. Now in Oklahoma, I think it's all going to remain the way it is. Oregon's had some talk of trying to redistrict. I don't think there's been anything substantial, but Oregon could try and draw out Oregon 2 if they really wanted to, the Democrats. I'm not sure if they will, but that could potentially be possible. Pennsylvania has some very close races that are up in 2026 that the Democrats are certainly targeting. We did see in 2024, Rob Bresnahan or Ryan McKenzie win PA 7 by 1 point, Rob Bresnahan win by 1.6, and Scott Perry win by 1.3 in these respective districts. Now, they are listed at Republican +4 and PA 8, PA 7 R +1, and we also saw PA 10 go R +3 and look PVI. But based on the current election environment, we could probably expect PA 7 or Ryan McKenzie will flip to the Democrats, and then it's certainly possible Scott Perry and Rob Bresnahan could both lose these races in Pennsylvania in an election year when the governor's race is expected to be a pretty big win for Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Rhode Island will pretty much remain the way it is. South Carolina will remain the way it is. South Dakota, obviously state at large, will remain. Tennessee should remain the way it is as well. Texas is very interesting. Texas, the map has already taken into account the seats that are going to flip. Texas 34 has already been redrawn to the Republican win. Al Green's district has already been redrawn into the Republican win. The Republican Texas 32 Democratic seat has been redrawn. Now the only seat that's really 100% a toss-up is Texas 28 with Henry Cuellar. This district has gotten a lot more Republican, and it's possible the Republicans could win this district, completing the 5 and flipping it to the Democratic side. But it's not necessarily a sure bet. It is possible that Henry Cuellar could hold on and narrowly win this seat. I think this one is still very much a toss-up, but for the sake of argument, we're going to give it to Henry Cuellar just for the sake of this video, but that one certainly could become a Republican win as well. Utah, there seems to be a lawsuit going on right now to overturn the 4th district being a Republican seat and getting it to be redrawn and to be more of a friendly district for the Democrats. And if that were to happen, that would net the Democrats an extra House seat in the state of Utah. That could make a very big difference in which party holds the House. Vermont will continue to be Democratic. With Virginia, the only district right now currently listed as toss-up is Jen Kiggins in Virginia 2. This is a very interesting race because it voted for Kiggins in 2024 by about 3.8% against the Democratic candidate. It flipped in 2022. Kiggins won by 3.4% against Elaine Loria. Before that, the district, which was redrawn, voted for the Democrat by about 5.7%. So this district is very interesting to watch because it is listed as even for the Cook PVI. So if the Democrats have a big enough night and resurgence in Virginia, we could very well see this race go for the Democrats. That puts Republicans at 217, Democrats are at 216, and unless I'm mistaken, Washington and Wisconsin may decide who holds the House. And the 3rd district, which is currently held by Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, very, very close race. She won against Joe Kent, I do believe, in 2024 by 3.9%. She will not be facing Joe Kent this time around, but it will be a close race regardless in this district, which is listed at Republican +2 on the Cook PVI. But I do think Gluesenkamp Perez very nearly holds on and wins this seat. Republicans 217, Democrats 217. Based on this current map, it could all come down to Wisconsin's 3rd district with Republican Derek Van Orden, who this district is listed at Republican +3. Van Orden only won in 2024 by 2.7%. So in a swing of about 5.8% or so, we could see this district nearly flip to the Democrats. Now, Wyoming, that's the way it is. So based on everything we just took into account, on the current polling and my current predictions for these races, and all the redistricting that could or could not be happening, based on all that, the Democrats could win the House over the Republicans by just one single House seat in 2026. Now, usually elections in America don't usually go this way. It's often when there's a big wave for one party, it usually is a sweeping wave and covers a lot of things. So some of the close races like Iowa 3, which I gave to Zach Nunn, the Republican, or maybe some of the redistricting in Ohio, like Ohio 9 or Ohio 13, maybe it falls through or doesn't go a certain way, or maybe even Maine 2. But on the current predictions right now, Democrats on the current House map would probably win the House by around 10 to 15 seats. But when redistricting is all factored into it, based on the current map and how things are going, Democrats would hold about 218, Republicans 217. And this would be really interesting if this is how it all goes. Because if this is the case, this could be like up to a week after Election Day, we're still counting votes, that we don't know which party is going to control the House if it goes this way. That's why this whole redistricting thing for 2026 is really so fascinating. Because depending on how the states are redrawn and which states are redrawn, this could be really, really interesting. We also have some close states that went for the Democrats that what if they go for the GOP? If Texas 28 goes for the Republicans with Henry Cuellar, well then the Republicans get up to 218, 217, then the GOP nearly holds the majority. So this conversation of redistricting is really fascinating and shows what a very close 2026 election could look like at the U.S. House level. Now, maybe this could all end up being wrong, ends up being a very big wave for the Democrats or a big wave for the Republicans, but in this scenario, this is exactly what the Republicans want. They want a very redistricted state across the country to redraw all their maps because it gives the Republicans a chance of holding the House. Whereas based on the current map right now, the Republicans really don't have that great of a chance at holding on. But if states follow Texas's suit in a lot of Republican states, that could potentially make up for that and give the Republicans a chance at keeping the House. So this is certainly all a lot and very complicated, but if you have any comments or questions or suggestions or anything, leave them down in the comment section below. I can't wait to check all those out. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to hit like and subscribe. I hope to see you in a future video.